The flames of fate. The jungle burned like a living creature in pain. Bright orange flames roared, licking the sky, and thick, black smoke rolled across the ground. The air was hot and sharp, stinging the skin and filling the lungs with ash. Ethan Kane ran through the chaos, his boots crunching over charred leaves. His heart pounded, not just from the heat, but from the sound he had heard minutes before. A voice. Faint, broken, and scared. "Help. Please. Help me." He should have turned back. The emergency beacon on his wrist buzzed with warnings. The fire was spreading fast, and the unstable ground of the alien moon could collapse at any moment. But Ethan couldn't ignore that voice. He rounded a smoldering tree and froze. A figure lay trapped beneath a thick, burning branch. The pale skin shimmered like silver beneath the soot, and long hair clung to a face twisted in pain. Glowing violet eyes locked onto Ethan's. Not human. Alien. The voice came again, weak but clear this time. "Please. Help me." Ethan acted without thinking. He grabbed a metal rod from his utility belt and jammed it under the branch. The heat bit into his gloves as he pushed with all his strength. The branch shifted slightly. The alien woman tried to pull her leg free, but cried out in pain. "Come on," Ethan grunted, muscles shaking. A deep crack split the air. The ground trembled beneath his feet. The fire roared louder, like a beast growing angry. "One more try," he shouted. With a last, desperate push, the branch rolled away. Ethan grabbed the woman's arm and pulled her up. Her leg bled, and she staggered, leaning against him. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head. "Pain, bad, but I try." Ethan wrapped her arm around his shoulders and half-carried her toward his shuttle. The flames closed in behind them, chasing like hungry predators. His breath burned in his chest. His legs ached with each step. A distant hum made him stop. The ground vibrated beneath his boots. The alien woman stiffened. "They come," she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze to the sky. Through the smoke, dark shapes appeared, sleek, black ships with glowing red eyes. They hovered like vultures, scanning the jungle. "Who are they?" Ethan asked. The woman shook her head. "Bad, they hunt me." Ethan cursed. His shuttle was still far away. The enemy ships began sweeping beams of light across the ground. "We need to hide," he said, pulling her toward a collapsed boulder. They ducked behind it as a beam passed just inches away, scorching the ground. The woman winced, clutching her leg. Ethan's mind raced. He was just a miner, not a soldier. He didn't know who she was or why these ships were after her. But leaving her here was not an option. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "Zara." "I'm Ethan. We'll get out of this, Zara." The hum of the ships grew louder. One ship descended, landing with a metallic hiss. Figures stepped out, tall, armored, and carrying energy rifles. Their faces were hidden behind black helmets. Zara's breath caught in her throat. "No, they find us." Ethan scanned their surroundings. His shuttle was still 100 meters away, hidden in a clearing. If they ran now, they'd be seen. If they stayed, they'd be caught. He made a decision. "Stay low. Follow me." They crawled along the ground, moving through ash and mud. Ethan's heart hammered with each passing second. One soldier turned their way. The red glow of the helmet visor passed over them, then moved on. They reached the edge of the clearing. The shuttle's metal hull glinted through the smoke. "Ready?" Ethan asked. Zara gave a shaky nod. "Go." They sprinted across the open ground. A shout rang out. The enemy had seen them. "Faster," Ethan yelled. Blaster bolts scorched the air. The ground exploded near their feet. Ethan dragged Zara up the shuttle's ramp and slammed the door shut. He dropped into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over controls. The engine roared to life. The enemy soldiers opened fire, striking the hull. The ship shook under the assault. Ethan pulled the controls hard. The shuttle lifted off, wobbling as blasts hit the rear thrusters. Come on, he growled. A missile lock alarm screamed. Ethan yanked the throttle, and the shuttle shot forward just as a missile streaked past, exploding in a burst of heat and light. The ship rocketed into the sky, leaving the burning jungle behind. For a moment, there was only silence except for their heavy breathing. "Thank you," Zara whispered. Ethan glanced at her. Her glowing eyes were filled with exhaustion and fear. "Who are they?" he asked. She hesitated. "Hunters. They want me dead." "Why?" Zora's eyes darkened. "Because I am Elinduri, and they fear what I know." Ethan frowned. The name sounded familiar but distant. The Elindari were ancient legends, a species said to have ruled the stars long ago. "Why would they fear you?" he asked. Zara opened her mouth to speak, but the radar alarm blared. Enemy ships were following. Ethan gripped the controls. "Hold on. This ride's about to get rough." The shuttle banked hard, diving toward the asteroid belt ahead. Behind them, the hunters gave chase. The chase begins. The shuttle shook as it shot through the thin atmosphere of the burning moon. Ethan Kane gripped the controls, his knuckles white. The enemy ships followed close behind, their weapons lighting up the dark sky. Each blast made the hull groan in protest. "Hold on," Ethan shouted over the roar of the engines. Zara sat slumped in the co-pilot's seat, her silver skin pale and her eyes half closed. Her leg, still bleeding, was strapped with a piece of torn fabric. She winced with each jolt. The radar screen blinked red. 4 enemy ships followed in tight formation. Their sleek, black frames moved like shadows in the void. These weren't just bounty hunters. They flew with precision, like trained military pilots. "Who are these guys?" Ethan muttered. Zara's lips moved, but her voice was faint. "The Black Sun Syndicate. They serve Cal." Cal. Ethan's mind raced. He'd heard that name whispered once in a miner's bar on Titan Station, a warlord who had risen from nowhere, taking control of pirate fleets and abandoned military tech. A dangerous, ruthless figure. "You said they want you dead. Why?" Ethan asked, steering the shuttle through the swirling asteroid field ahead. Zara blinked slowly. "Not dead. Captured. Then dead. I hold knowledge they need." "Care to share?" Ethan dodged a jagged rock tumbling through space. The enemy ship split apart, flanking him. "The location of something powerful, something Kale needs to control the stars." The gravity of her words hit Ethan like ice water. Control the stars. That sounded like myth, not reality. But the fear in her eyes was real. A sharp beep pierced the cabin. The lead enemy ship fired a guided missile. On the screen, the missile's red dot locked onto them and closed the distance fast. Ethan cursed and flipped a switch. The ship's countermeasure systems sputtered to life. He launched a cluster of flares, but the missile ignored them. "It's tracking our heat signature," he said, mind racing. Zara sat up, her eyes glowing faintly. "Can you fly close to the asteroid?" "That's insane." Her gaze hardened. "Do it. Trust me." Ethan exhaled and yanked the controls, diving toward the largest asteroid ahead. The missile followed. The enemy ships hung back, waiting for them to make a mistake. "Closer," Zara whispered. The asteroid's surface rushed toward them, a gray, cratered plain littered with jagged ridges. The missile followed, weaving through the rocks like a hungry predator. "Now." Zora raised her hand and placed it on the control panel. Her fingers glowed as symbols appeared across the screen. Symbols Ethan had never seen before. The shuttle's engines flared, releasing a sudden burst of electromagnetic energy. The missile veered off course, slammed into a ridge, and exploded with a deafening blast. Shrapnel peppered the shuttle's hull. Ethan gaped at the screen. "What the hell did you just do?" "Old Elindari tech," Zara said, her voice shaky. The ship recognized my touch. Wait, this ship is Elendary? Ethan asked, stunned. He had bought it years ago from a junk dealer on Mars, thinking it was just a modified mining craft. Zora didn't answer. Her head sagged against the seat. The enemy ships regrouped, firing again. Ethan saw a narrow gap between two tumbling boulders ahead. He angled the shuttle toward it. The gap was barely wider than the ship itself. One mistake, and they'd be crushed. "Don't die, don't die," Ethan muttered, guiding the shuttle into the gap. Metal scraped against stone. Sparks flew across the cockpit. The enemy ships hesitated at the entrance of the gap, wary of following too closely. "We might make it," Ethan said, exhaling in relief. Zora's eyes snapped open. No, they set a trap. Too late. Ahead, a massive ship loomed from behind an asteroid. It was dark and angular, with a skull-like emblem painted on its hull. The Black Sun flagship. Its forward cannons glowed with crimson energy. They knew we'd run, Ethan realized. They herded us here. The enemy ship fired. Ethan slammed the controls. The shuttle banked hard, engines screaming. The blast grazed their hull, tearing through the left engine. The ship spun wildly. Alarms wailed. "Brace," Ethan shouted. The shuttle slammed into a small asteroid and skidded across the surface before crashing into a crater. The impact threw Ethan forward against his harness. Zora cried out as the ship groaned and settled into silence. Smoke filled the cockpit. Sparks rained from exposed wires. Ethan's vision blurred, and pain pulsed through his ribs. He unbuckled himself and turned to Zora. "Zora, you okay?" She coughed weakly. "Alive, but we can't stay." Ethan peeked through the cracked viewport. The enemy flagship was descending toward the crater. Black armored soldiers disembarked, their weapons glowing in the dark. "Looks like they want you pretty bad," Ethan said, pulling a plasma pistol from a compartment. The small weapon felt like a water gun compared to the rifles the enemy carried. Zora placed a hand on his arm. "We can't fight them, but we can escape." With one engine half dead and a broken landing gear, Ethan asked. She gave a faint smile. "The ship can still jump." Ethan's stomach tightened. A blind jump. We could end up in the middle of a star. Better than captured. The enemy soldiers were climbing the crater's edge now, their red visors glowing like demonic eyes. "Okay," Ethan said, powering up the engine. "Let's hope your magic touch works again." Zora placed both hands on the control panel. Ancient symbols flared beneath her palms. The ship shuddered as the damaged engine roared to life. The enemy raised their rifles. "Jump now," Zora shouted. Ethan hit the jump button. The ship vibrated violently as energy surged through it. Outside, the enemy fired, their blasts ricocheting off the hull. A second later, the world twisted into a tunnel of light. The enemy moon, the flagship, and the Black Sun soldiers vanished behind them. Ethan slumped back in his seat, breathing hard. Zora sagged beside him, her skin even paler than before. The ship's computer flashed coordinates Ethan didn't recognize. "Where did we go?" he asked. "Safe place, for now," Zora whispered. Her eyes fluttered shut. Ethan rubbed his face. He was exhausted, hurt, and full of questions. Who exactly was Zora? What knowledge did she have that made a warlord like Cal hunt her across the stars? And how was his old mining shuttle connected to Elendary technology? The jump tunnel ended abruptly. The ship emerged into the shadow of a massive, derelict space station floating above a gas giant. The station's surface was covered in strange, glowing rooms, the same kind that had appeared under Zora's hands. "What the hell is this place?" Ethan whispered. Zora opened her eyes and gave a faint smile. "Home," she said. The hidden truth. The ship drifted toward the ancient space station, its dark surface covered in glowing rooms. Ethan had never seen anything like it. The station hung in the shadow of a massive gas giant, hidden from view like a ghost in deep space. It was eerily quiet. No distress signals, no beacons, just the faint, pulsing glow of the ancient symbols. Zara stirred beside him, her body weak but her eyes determined. "Where are we?" Ethan asked, gripping the controls, ready to escape if needed. Zara's voice was soft but firm. "Sanctuary." Ethan frowned. He didn't like that word. In his experience, sanctuary usually meant trap. The ship's systems flickered as if something unseen was scanning them. Then, with a deep mechanical groan, a docking bay opened in the side of the station. The ship's autopilot suddenly activated, taking control. "Zara, what's happening?" Ethan tightened his grip on the armrests. "The station recognizes me," she murmured. "It's letting us in." Ethan wasn't sure he liked that either. The ship glided smoothly into the docking bay, touching down with a soft metallic thud. The lights inside flickered on, illuminating a vast chamber filled with ancient Elindari technology. Some machines still hummed with faint energy, while others lay broken and abandoned. Ethan unbuckled his harness and grabbed his plasma pistol. He wasn't about to walk into this place unarmed. Zara turned to him, her violet eyes serious. "You won't need that." "Yeah, well, last time I trusted a stranger. I got shot at," Ethan muttered. She didn't argue. Instead, she stood slowly, wincing as she put weight on her injured leg. Ethan moved to help, but she waved him off, pressing a glowing hand to the wound. The injury slowly knitted itself back together. Ethan stared. "Okay, that's new." She exhaled, steadier now. "Come. We don't have much time." Ethan followed her down the boarding ramp, his boots echoing in the empty station. The place felt ancient, too old, even by galactic standards. He ran a hand over a nearby console, brushing off centuries of dust. "How long has this place been here?" he asked. Zara's fingers traced the symbols on the walls. "Thousands of years, maybe more." Ethan whistled. "And no one's found it." "No one living," Zara said, her voice low. Ethan stopped walking. "That's not reassuring." Zara pressed her palm against a control panel. The symbols glowed brighter, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a massive circular chamber beyond. At its center stood a raised platform, surrounded by floating holographic displays filled with unreadable text. The moment Zara stepped inside, the displays changed, shifting into something that looked like a map. Ethan stepped closer, eyes scanning the holograms. "That looks like the core systems," he muttered, pointing to a cluster of stars. Zara nodded. "This is what Cal is after. This station holds the last records of the Elindari." Ethan frowned. "Records of what?" Zara hesitated, then turned to face him fully. "The location of the heart of Elindar." Ethan had heard a lot of crazy stories in his time, but this one took the prize. The heart of Elindar was a myth, a legend whispered across the galaxy. Some said it was a weapon. Others claimed it was the source of the Elindari's power. "You're telling me this thing is real?" he asked, skeptical. Zara nodded. "Not just real. It's the key to stopping Kale." Ethan exhaled. "Great. And where exactly is this magical space rock?" Zara reached out, and the holographic map zoomed in on a distant system. A single planet glowed at its center. "Earth," Zara said. Ethan blinked. "Wait, Earth. My Earth." "Yes," Zara confirmed. "The heart was hidden there long ago, in the ruins of the old Martian colonies." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "And Kale knows this." Zara's expression darkened. "He suspects. That's why his forces have been moving closer to human space." Ethan swore under his breath. For years, Earth had been safe from the galaxy's larger wars. The human colonies were small, insignificant compared to the great empires. But if Kale was planning to invade, he turned to Zara. "What happens if he gets it?" She met his gaze, and for the first time, Ethan saw true fear in her eyes. If Kel claims the heart, he will become unstoppable. He will enslave entire worlds. No one will be able to resist him. Ethan exhaled. So what's the plan? We just walk onto Mars and grab it before he does. Zara hesitated. It's not that simple. The heart is sealed. Only an Elendari of royal blood can awaken it. Ethan tilted his head. Royal blood. You mean? Zara nodded. I am the last. The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just about saving one alien princess. This was about stopping a warlord from conquering the galaxy. And somehow, Ethan, just a simple miner, was caught in the middle of it. He let out a breath and holstered his pistol. Well, guess we better get to Mars before Kel does. Zara managed a small smile. Then we must leave at once. Ethan turned toward the ship, but something caught his eye. A flicker of movement on one of the station's security screens. He frowned and stepped closer. The screen showed the docking bay. It was empty, except for a small blinking device attached to the wall. Ethan's blood ran cold. Zara, he said carefully, did you set up any beacons? She frowned. No, why? Ethan's jaw clenched. Because someone just put a tracker on our ship. A cold silence fell between them. Then, the station's alarms blared to life. Zara's eyes widened. No. Ethan checked the security feed. A Black Sun warship had just exited hyperspace, heading straight for them. They had been found. Ethan grabbed Zora's wrist and pulled her toward the ship. Time to go. The station trembled as the enemy ship fired its first shot. The blast rocked the hull, sending sparks flying. Ethan launched himself into the pilot's seat and powered up the engines. The enemy warship loomed closer, preparing to fire again. Zara strapped into the co-pilot's seat. Can we make the jump? Engines are still damaged, Ethan muttered. But if we die here, Kel wins, so we don't have much choice. He slammed the throttle forward. The ship lurched, engines roaring as they shot toward the stars. Behind them, the enemy warship opened fire. Zara gripped the armrest. Ethan. The ship rocked violently. Lights flickered. Ethan gritted his teeth. Hold on. The ship's jump drive engaged. The stars stretched into endless light. Then everything vanished. Allies and betrayal. The ship tumbled through hyperspace like a wounded animal, its engines groaning with each passing second. Sparks crackled from the control panels. The air smelled of burning wires. Ethan Kane tightened his grip on the controls, silently praying the damaged systems would hold just a little longer. Beside him, Zara sat with her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. Her silver skin was pale, and her glowing violet eyes flickered beneath her eyelids. The strain of activating the ancient Elendari systems was taking its toll. Ethan glanced at the flickering nav screen. They were on a blind jump. No destination set, no clear path. The ship's core was overheating, and the hull integrity had dropped to 30%. One more hit like the last one, and they'd be dust floating through space. Come on, girl, Ethan whispered to the ship. Hold together. The ship jerked violently. The hyperspace tunnel around them shimmered and cracked. Brace, Ethan shouted. The ship burst out of hyperspace with a loud crack, tumbling end over end. Ethan fought the controls until the ship stabilized. Outside the viewport, a massive gas giant loomed, its surface swirling with golden storms. A small rocky moon hovered nearby, dotted with abandoned mining stations. Where are we? Ethan muttered. Zara opened her eyes, voice weak. Juno 7. Old mining colony. Ethan arched an eyebrow. You know this place. My family once had interests here, she said. Ethan didn't like how she said that, but he had bigger problems. The ship's oxygen reserves were dropping fast. The enemy's last shot had damaged the filtration system. We need repairs, he said. Fast. He maneuvered the ship toward the moon. As they approached one of the derelict stations, the ship's comm crackled to life. Unidentified vessel. This is Outpost 7. State your business. Ethan's heart jumped. He hadn't expected anyone here. He activated the comm. Outpost 7. This is... the rust bucket. We're in trouble. Engines fried, oxygen low. Need emergency docking. There was a long pause. Rust bucket, ha. The voice responded with a chuckle. I know only one fool who names a ship like that. Ethan Kane, you slippery bastard. Ethan froze. He recognized that voice. Captain Daniel Reyes. An old friend. Well, more like an old problem. They'd worked together years ago mining asteroid belts, until Reyes had turned to smuggling. Reyes, Ethan said cautiously, didn't know you were running this place. Didn't know you were still alive, Reyes replied. Docking bay's open. Come on in before your ship breaks apart. Ethan hesitated. Something felt off, but they had no choice. Hang on, Zara, Ethan said, guiding the ship into the docking bay. The landing was rough. The damaged landing gear screeched against the metal floor. The ship settled with a groan. Ethan powered down the engines and unbuckled himself. Stay here, he told Zara, handing her his spare plasma pistol. If anyone tries to get in, shoot first. She gave a faint nod, gripping the weapon tightly. Ethan stepped out into the docking bay. The place was dimly lit, filled with crates and rusted machinery. Reyes stood across the room, arms wide, and a cocky grin on his face. He was taller and leaner than Ethan remembered, with graying hair and a scar running down his left cheek. Ethan Kane, Reyes said, striding forward. Still getting into trouble. I see. Some things never change, Ethan replied, forcing a smile. He didn't lower his guard. Reyes's eyes flicked to the battered shuttle. Looks like you've been in a war zone. You could say that. And your passenger? Reyes asked casually. Caught a glimpse through the viewport. Silver skin, glowing eyes. Elindari. Ha. Ethan's gut twisted. He hadn't mentioned Zora. She's a friend, Ethan said carefully. Reyes's grin widened. Yeah, about that. See, word's been going around about an Elindari royal on the run. Big bounty. Real big. Ethan's heart sank. His eyes scanned the shadows. Several figures stepped out from behind the crates, weapons raised. Reyes's smile turned cold. Sorry, buddy, Reyes said. Business is business. Ethan's pulse raced. He slowly raised his hands. Think about what you're doing, Reyes. The people hunting her. They're the same ones who'll wipe out Earth. Reyes shrugged. Earth ain't ever cared about me. And Kale pays better than your conscience does. Ethan's mind raced. Reyes was greedy but cautious. Maybe he could stall. All right, Ethan said, lowering his hands. You win, but you need me to get her out of the ship. She's scared, only trusts me. Reyes smirked. Nice try, Ethan. But I know you too well. He gestured to his men. Open the ship, drag her out. Two of Reyes's thugs moved toward the shuttle's door. Ethan tensed. Zara was still weak and outnumbered. If they got their hands on her, it was over. Reyes followed his men, stepping closer to Ethan. You know, Kane, you could walk away from this. Take a cut of the bounty. Set yourself up nice. Ethan forced a laugh. Yeah. And what happens when Kale wins and burns Earth to ash? Reyes's eyes narrowed. Not my problem. The thugs reached the ship's door and pried it open. Zara, run, Ethan shouted. A burst of plasma fire crackled from inside the shuttle. One thug fell with a cry, clutching his chest. The other fired blindly into the cabin. Reyes cursed and aimed his pistol at Ethan's head. Big mistake. Ethan lunged. He grabbed Reyes's arm and twisted it sharply. The pistol clattered to the ground. Ethan slammed his elbow into Reyes's face, sending him sprawling. The remaining thugs fired. Ethan dove behind a stack of crates. Zara, he shouted. She appeared in the ship's doorway, her eyes glowing bright violet. Her hands crackled with blue energy. She raised them, and the air hummed. The thugs froze as the energy slammed into them like an invisible wave, knocking them unconscious. Ray staggered to his feet, blood running from his nose. He reached for a hidden knife. Ethan saw it too late. Rise lunged, but Zara raised her hand again. The knife stopped midair. "No," she said softly. The knife twisted in the air and shot back toward Ray's. It buried itself in his shoulder. He screamed, falling to his knees. Ethan walked over and kicked the pistol away. He looked down at Ray's, eyes cold. "You always bet on the wrong side, Reyes." Reyes groaned in pain. "Kale, we'll find you. You can't run forever." "Maybe not," Ethan said, turning away. "But we can make him regret chasing us." He helped Zara into the shuttle. The engines roared to life. As they lifted off, Ethan glanced at her pale face. "That energy blast, that was new," he said. She gave a weak smile. "The heart's energy, it's waking up." Ethan's stomach tightened. Then Kale knows we're getting close. Ahead, the stars stretched into infinity. Behind them, Reyes's outpost shrank into darkness. But Ethan knew the war was only beginning. The royal secret. The ship hummed softly as it drifted through the endless sea of stars. Inside the cockpit, the only sounds were the quiet crackle of damaged circuits and the faint, labored breathing of Zara Elinduri. Ethan Kane sat in the pilot's seat, eyes locked on the navigation display. The coordinates Zara had unlocked earlier hovered on the screen. Mars, Olympus ruins. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. He knew Mars well enough. He'd mined its asteroid fields, visited its domed cities, and heard the old ghost stories about the ruins beneath Olympus Mons. Legends said the Elindari left behind something powerful there, something that had drawn treasure hunters and archaeologists for decades. None of them had ever found anything. But Zara wasn't guessing. She knew. And if she was right, the heart of Elinder was buried beneath the surface. Zara stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the cabin lights, but exhaustion lined her face. "You're awake," Ethan said, giving her a faint smile. "Good. I was starting to think you used up all your space magic back there." She gave a soft chuckle. It wasn't magic. It was heritage. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. My heritage mostly gives me bad knees and a fondness for whiskey." Zara smiled, but it quickly faded. Her eyes shifted to the display. "Mars. He's getting closer, isn't he?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "We need to get there before Kale does. But the ship's barely holding together. We need repairs, fuel, and oxygen." She sat up, wincing as her muscles protested. "There's a hidden Elindari relay station nearby. It might still have resources. If we can access it, I can cloak us from Cal's sensors." Ethan nodded. "Relay station it is. Let's hope your ancestors liked to keep things tidy." The forgotten relay. The relay station orbited a cold, lifeless moon near Jupiter. From the outside, it looked like a massive, jagged rock, an old camouflage design. As the ship approached, faint blue lines lit up across the station's surface, responding to Zara's presence. The docking clamps latched onto the ship with a deep thud. The airlock hissed open, releasing a metallic, sterile scent. Inside, the station was dimly lit, its walls etched with Elindari runes. Zara walked ahead, her hand grazing the wall. The symbols glowed under her touch. Ethan followed closely, pistol drawn. "I don't like how quiet it is," he muttered. "Quiet means safe," Zara said, though her eyes scanned the shadows cautiously. They entered a central chamber where a large crystalline console pulsed with soft, blue light. Zara placed her hands on it. The station seemed to breathe, its lights brightening. Lines of Elindari text appeared, hovering in the air. Zara's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "They've set a trap," she whispered. "Cal's fleet is already near Mars." Ethan cursed. He's moving faster than we thought. The heart's defenses are old. If he gets to it first. Zora's voice trailed off. Ethan gripped her shoulder. Then we don't let him. What defenses does the heart have? Zora hesitated. The heart is protected by the trial of worthiness. Only someone with royal blood can pass it. If Kel tries, the core will destroy itself. Okay, Ethan said. So you walk in, pass the trial, and we get the heart. It's not that simple, Zora said, eyes dark with worry. The trial isn't just about blood. It's about strength of heart, mind, and spirit. If I fail, I die. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. That's not happening. We'll figure it out. The station beeped suddenly. A new holographic image appeared, showing dozens of enemy ships in high orbit above Mars. The largest ship, a massive black dreadnought with a crimson sun emblem, was Cal's flagship. He's already there, Zora said. Ethan stared at the image. The dreadnought dwarfed anything Earth had in its fleet. It bristled with energy cannons and fighter bays. If Cal deployed ground forces, they wouldn't stand a chance. He clenched his jaw. Looks like we're crashing this party. The enemy moves. They disconnected from the relay station and powered toward Mars. Zora activated the Elendari cloaking field, which made the ship nearly invisible to modern sensors. The journey took hours. Ethan tried to rest, but his mind kept racing. Zora sat beside him, silent and pale. Her fingers traced the glowing runes on her wrist, symbols that marked her as the last of the royal bloodline. You okay? Ethan asked softly. She nodded but didn't look up. I'm scared. Ethan was surprised by her honesty. Me too, he admitted. But fear just means we care what happens next. And right now, what happens next is kicking Cal's ass. That earned a small smile. The ship slipped into orbit above Mars. Below, the rust-red surface stretched out endlessly. Olympus Mons towered like a scared sentinel, its peak hidden by thin clouds. Near the base of the mountain, a network of old ruins spread across the desert. Cal's forces were already there, dark shapes clustered around massive excavation machines. There, Zora said, pointing to a faint energy signature deep underground. That's the heart's chamber. Ethan's stomach tightened. Looks like Cal's digging fast. We don't have much time. The radar pinged softly. 3 enemy patrol ships circled the ruins. Ethan adjusted course, skimming low through the thin Martian atmosphere. The ship trembled under the strain, but the cloak held. We'll land in that canyon, Ethan said. We go in on foot. Zora didn't argue. The ship settled behind a ridge half a kilometer from the ruins. Ethan strapped on his survival pack and checked his plasma rifle. Zora tucked the smaller pistol into a holster on her hip. Let's go, Ethan said. The descent. The Martian surface was cold and unforgiving. The thin atmosphere tugged at their brothers. Ethan led the way, staying low. They crept toward the ruins, ducking behind rocks as enemy patrols passed overhead. The entrance to the heart's chamber lay hidden beneath a massive stone slab covered in Elendari symbols. Zora pressed her hands to it. The runes flared, and the slab shifted aside with a low groan. Down we go, Ethan whispered. They descended into darkness. The walls of the tunnel glowed faintly, guiding their path. The air grew warmer. At the bottom, they entered a vast chamber. At its center stood a pedestal made of shimmering crystal. Above it floated a translucent sphere pulsing softly with golden light. A heart of Elendar. Zara stepped forward. This is it. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. Stone cracked overhead. They know we're here, Ethan said. The floor split open as a large figure dropped into the chamber. Black armor gleamed under the golden light. His helmet bore the crimson sun emblem. He raised his plasma blade, its edge glowing red. Cal. The warlord's voice echoed through the chamber. Thank you for leading me here, Princess. Ethan raised his rifle, but Cal moved faster. A blast of kinetic energy slammed into Ethan's chest, hurling him against the wall. Pain exploded through his ribs. His vision blurred. Cale turned to Zara. "Step aside, or die." Zara stood firm, hands glowing with energy. "The heart will never be yours." Cale laughed. "You don't understand, child. The heart doesn't need royal blood. It needs strength, and I have more than you could imagine." He lunged. Zara raised her hands, unleashing a blast of energy. Cale absorbed it with his blade, forcing her backward. Ethan struggled to his knees, raising his rifle. His chest burned with pain, but he ignored it. Cale was pushing Zara toward the pedestal. "No," Ethan whispered. He aimed at Cale's unprotected back and fired. The plasma bolt struck the warlord's armor and sizzled against the metal, but Cale barely flinched. Zara cried out as she stumbled. Cale reached the pedestal and extended his armored hand toward the heart. The golden sphere crackled with energy as it reacted to his presence. The chamber shook violently. Cracks spread along the walls. "No," Zara screamed. Ethan fired again. The shot hit Cale's wrist, knocking his hand away. The energy field around the heart flared brightly, sending shockwaves through the room. Cale roared in frustration and turned toward Ethan. "Insect," he snarled, raising his blade. Ethan braced himself, knowing he wouldn't survive the next strike. The heart pulsed suddenly, brighter than before. The golden light expanded, surrounding Zara. Her eyes glowed white, and her feet lifted off the ground. Her voice filled the chamber, layered with ancient power. "You are unworthy," she declared. Cale stepped back, shock flashing across his face. The light surged outward, slamming into Cale and hurling him across the room. The warlord crashed into the far wall with a bone-crunching impact. His armor sparked. He didn't move. The heart hovered in front of Zara, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Her feet touched the ground gently, and the light faded. Ethan pushed himself up. What just happened? Zara turned to him, eyes still glowing faintly. "The heart has chosen," she said. "And now, Cale will come with everything he has." The battle for Earth. The chamber trembled with fading echoes as the golden light of the heart of Elinder dimmed to a soft pulse. The massive figure of Lord Cale lay crumpled against the far wall, his armor cracked and sparking. The rooms along the walls flickered like candle flames in the wake of the heart's awakening. Ethan Kane leaned against the nearest stone pillar, every muscle in his body aching. Smoke filled the air, and the heat of the energy surge had left the chamber's surface scorched. "Is he dead?" Ethan asked, voice raw. Zara Elendari stood in the center of the chamber, the heart of Elinder floating above her palm. The golden sphere pulsed softly, like a living thing attuned to her heartbeat. Her eyes still glowed faintly with the ancient energy. "No," she said, voice tight. "But he's wounded." The heart rejected him. Ethan forced himself to stand. "Then let's finish the job." He raised his plasma rifle and took aim at Cale's exposed helmet. One shot, one chance to end the nightmare before it spread. Zara raised a hand. "Wait." Ethan's finger froze on the trigger. "What? Why?" "He's a monster. He'll come back if we don't end him here." Zara's expression was unreadable. The heart spared him for a reason. Ethan's jaw tightened. "The guy just tried to kill you, and if we don't stop him now, Earth's next." Cale groaned, shifting slightly. His breathing was ragged. The armor along his chest plate had been shattered, exposing scorched skin. His helmet had partially melted, revealing cold, calculating eyes filled with pain and fury. Zara turned to Ethan. "Help me get the heart to the surface. We need to activate the planetary defenses before Cale's fleet arrives." Ethan hesitated, then lowered his rifle. "Fine, but if he moves, I'm shooting him." They turned toward the exit. Zara held the heart close, and the stone doorway opened at her touch. The tunnel trembled as they ascended. Ethan's mind raced. He didn't like leaving Cale alive. That kind of enemy never stopped. Surface tensions. They emerged into the thin Martian daylight. Above them, the red sky shimmered with faint distortions, the cloaking field Zara had activated earlier. In the distance, Kel's fleet loomed like a swarm of black vultures. The ship sat where they had left it, partially hidden behind a ridge. Ethan helped Zara aboard, her body sagging with exhaustion from maintaining the connection with the heart. "Strap in," Ethan said, running pre-flight checks. The ship groaned as systems came online. Zora placed the heart on the console. The ship's lights flickered, and the engine core surged with renewed energy. Symbols Ethan couldn't read appeared across the screens. The Illindari technology, dormant for centuries, was waking up. "Power levels are maxed out," Ethan said, eyes wide. "Whatever this thing is, it just supercharged the ship." "The heart responds to need," Zora said softly. "It senses the threat." Ethan tapped the thrusters, and the ship lifted effortlessly into the sky. But as they rose, the cloaking field collapsed. The Black Sun fleet immediately reacted. Fighter wings peeled away from the dreadnought, streaking toward them like a swarm of black arrows. "They see us," Ethan muttered. "Go," Zora said, gripping the edges of the console. Ethan punched the thrusters. The ship shot upward, faster than it ever had before. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the sky around them. The dreadnought turned toward them, its main cannon charging. Ethan's heart pounded. "They're locking on." Zora placed her hands on the heart. The glowing sphere expanded, wrapping the ship in a golden energy shield. The dreadnought fired. A massive crimson blast surged toward them. The golden shield pulsed, and the enemy blast struck it, then reflected back. The energy beam slammed into the dreadnought's hull, tearing through its shields and sending it spiraling. Ethan laughed in disbelief. "Holy hell. Can we do that again?" "No," Zora said, sweat dripping from her brow. "That was all I had." The enemy fighters regrouped, swarming like angry hornets. Ethan veered hard toward open space. The ship shot past the fleet and raced toward Earth. "They'll follow us," Ethan said. "Not for long," Zora said, voice faint. "The heart's power has been activated. Earth will awaken its defenses." Ethan didn't know what that meant, but he wasn't about to argue. The blue-green curve of Earth appeared on the horizon. "Hang on," Ethan said. He pushed the engines to maximum. The ship broke through the atmosphere in a streak of golden light. Alarms blared as the overloaded engines strained to handle the speed. They shot toward the North American continent. Below, city lights glimmered across the surface like scattered stars. "Where do we go?" Ethan asked. "Mars was the key," Zora said, eyes glowing again. "Earth is the heart. We must reach the Illindari core beneath the Himalayas." Ethan veered toward Asia. Enemy ships appeared in orbit, tracking them. The lead ship broadcast a message. "This is Commander Sharn of the Black Sun Syndicate. Surrender the heart, or we will destroy Earth city by city." Ethan switched on the comm. "Yeah, hi, Commander. I'd like to file a complaint. Your fleet tried to kill me earlier. Not cool." The enemy commander didn't respond, but the fighters accelerated toward them. "Almost there," Zora whispered. The snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas rose ahead. Ethan saw nothing unusual until the heart pulsed again. The ground beneath the tallest peak shimmered, revealing a massive crystalline dome hidden beneath a cloaking field. "That's new," Ethan said. "Land there," Zora ordered. Ethan dove toward the dome. The enemy fighters closed in, firing. Plasma blasts streaked past the hull. The dome split open, revealing a landing platform. Ethan angled the ship downward. The fighters tried to follow, but the dome sealed itself just as the ship touched down. The heart of Earth. The platform lowered into a vast chamber. At its center stood a colossal structure made of glowing crystal. The runes carved into it matched those from the Martian ruins. Zara stepped forward, cradling the heart. "This is Earth's shield," she said. the last gift of the Illindari. If the heart is placed here, it will awaken the ancient defenses. Ethan scanned the walls. Gigantic energy cannons were embedded in the structure, powered by massive conduits that snaked into the ground. The comm crackled again. Commander Sharn's voice returned. "We have deployed the main cannon. Surrender, or we fire on Earth's capital cities." Ethan clenched his fists. The enemy dreadnought hovered in orbit, its primary cannon glowing with lethal energy. "How long to activate the defenses?" he asked. Zara's hands trembled as she lifted the heart toward the core. "Minutes, if I survive the connection." Ethan paled. "Survive? What are you talking about?" Zora placed the heart into the crystal core. The moment it connected, energy surged through the chamber. The walls vibrated with ancient power. Zara cried out and collapsed to her knees, her hands locked to the glowing surface. "Zara." Ethan knelt beside her. Her skin was burning hot. "I have to stay connected," she gasped. "The system is taking my life energy to reactivate." The dreadnought's cannon charge. Outside, the sky turned crimson. "You're not dying here," Ethan said. He gripped her shoulders. "There has to be another way." She met his eyes, tears streaming down her face. "The defenses won't fire unless a worthy Illindari stays connected." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let her sacrifice herself. But if she disconnected, Earth would fall. Above, the dreadnought fired. A beam of energy streaked toward the planet. The core pulsed. Energy cannons across Earth's surface awakened. Beams of golden light shot skyward, converging into a massive shield. The enemy blast struck the shield and dispersed with a deafening crack. The shield redirected the energy back into space. The dreadnought exploded in a ball of fire, breaking apart in orbit. Ethan shielded Zara as the chamber shook. The energy core powered down, its task complete. Zara collapsed into his arms, her skin ice cold. "Stay with me," Ethan pleaded. Her eyes fluttered open briefly. "We did it. Earth is safe." Her breathing slowed. Her body went limp. Ethan held her close, tears burning his eyes. The final stand. The energy core's glow faded to a dull hum. The heart of Illindar hovered motionless above the crystalline pedestal, its light dim and exhausted. Zara Illindari lay limp in Ethan Kane's arms, her skin pale and cold, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me, Zara," Ethan whispered, voice breaking. His chest ached with helplessness. He had seen death before, on asteroid rigs after accidents, in pirate raids. But never like this. Never someone who had become family. The chamber walls trembled with the aftermath of the planetary defenses activation. The shield network had held. Earth was safe, for now. But the cost. Zara had said the Illindari core required life energy to awaken fully. She had given everything. "Come on," Ethan muttered, pulling her closer. "You can't give up now. We've still got Kale to deal with. You promised we'd beat him together." The only response was the faint whisper of her breath. His eyes blurred with tears. Outside, the defense shield shimmered against the dark sky. The wreckage of Kale's flagship drifted in orbit, its remains burning like a dying star. But other enemy ships were regrouping beyond the shield's reach. Kale wasn't done yet. Ethan clenched his jaw. He laid Zara gently on the floor and pressed a hand to her forehead. Her pulse was faint, almost imperceptible. He had no medical training, no advanced tech, just stubborn human resolve. "You're not dying," he said through clenched teeth. "Not on my watch." The heart of Illindar pulsed softly above them. Ethan glanced at it, then at the runes on the pedestal. The ancient language was unreadable to him. But Zara had said the heart responded to need, to courage. He didn't have Illindari blood, but maybe that didn't matter. Ethan placed his hands on the pedestal. "If you can hear me," he said aloud, voice echoing in the chamber, "you've got your princess here. She gave you everything. Now give her back, or I swear I'll find a way to destroy you." The crystal felt warm beneath his palms. The golden sphere above it flickered. "Come on," he growled. "Save her." The rooms glowed brighter. The warmth spread through his arms, reaching his chest. Pain lanced through him, sharp and cold. He screamed but held on. The pedestal drew energy from him, just as it had from Zara. The heart blazed with renewed light. The warmth around Ethan's hands vanished. He collapsed to his knees, gasping. The glow shifted from the pedestal to Zora's body. Light wrapped around her like a cocoon, seeping into her skin. Her body arched with the force of. Ethan scrambled toward her. Zara. Her eyes snapped open, glowing bright white. Her chest heaved as if she had been underwater for hours and had finally come up for air. The light faded, leaving her silver skin shining with renewed energy. "Ethan," she whispered, voice raspy. He exhaled a shaky laugh. "Yeah, I'm here." She sat up slowly, confusion in her eyes. "What happened?" "The heart. It listened," Ethan said. He tried to stand but collapsed. Zara caught him. "You gave it your energy," she realized, voice trembling. "You saved me." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Like I said, partners." Before she could respond, the comm panel on the wall crackled to life. A voice, sharp and angry, filled the chamber. "This is Lord Kell of the Black Sun Dominion. Earth is under siege. Surrender the heart, or we will launch a planetary bombardment." Ethan's head jerked up. That bastard's still alive. Zara stood, her expression hardening. "He's desperate." Ethan struggled to his feet. "What are we looking at here?" Zora placed her hand on the pedestal. The holographic display activated, showing Earth's orbit. Kell's dreadnought was gone, but smaller warships were forming a blockade. A massive siege cruiser had taken position above North America, its primary cannon charging. "He's going to fire on the city," Zora said. "Millions will die." "Can the planetary defenses stop it?" Ethan asked. "They're still recharging from the first blast," she said, voice tight. "The system needs more time." Ethan studied the map. "What about the heart? Can it power the defenses again?" Zara hesitated. "Yes, but at a cost." "Don't care. Let's do it." She gripped his arm. "Ethan, if the heart fires again this soon, it might kill us both." Ethan met her eyes. "Then let's make it count." Zara swallowed hard, then nodded. The last stand. The chamber shuddered as the enemy cruiser fired its first barrage. Plasma rounds hammered the planetary shield. Cracks spread across the shimmering dome. Zora placed her hands on the pedestal. The heart vibrated, eager and aware. Ethan laid his hands beside hers. The pedestal flared with golden light. The core roared to life. Energy surged through them, both hot, sharp, and unforgiving. The pain was unbearable, but Ethan gritted his teeth. Outside, the Earth's defense platforms woke. Massive cannons hidden across the planet's surface pivoted toward the siege cruiser. Energy conduits lit up from the Arctic to the equator. The cruiser fired a second barrage. The shield trembled, then shattered. Kell's ship prepared its final strike. "Now," Zora gasped. The heart pulsed. Beams of golden energy erupted from Earth's surface, converging into a single blinding spear. The planetary defenses focused the blast and fired upward. The energy beam pierced the atmosphere and struck the siege cruiser head-on. The enemy ship's shields collapsed instantly. The beam tore through the hull, igniting the core. The cruiser exploded in a massive fireball. Shockwaves rippled through the enemy fleet. The smaller ships scrambled to retreat. The Black Sun Dominion's fleet fractured. Earth had won. Aftermath. The energy in the chamber faded. Ethan collapsed against the pedestal, his heart racing painfully. Zara fell beside him. He reached for her hand. "We did it." She squeezed his fingers weakly. "Yes, we did." Outside, the sky cleared. Earth was safe. Rescue teams arrived hours later, led by Earth's defense forces. Ethan and Zara were taken to a medical station in high orbit. Doctors marveled at their survival. The heart had fused elendary energy with Ethan's human DNA. He woke days later to Zara sitting beside him. Her violet eyes were no longer afraid. "Hey," he rasped. She smiled. "Have yourself. Earth is safe. The fleet's gone. Kale escaped, but he's broken. The elendary archives are reactivating. Humanity now has access to thousands of years of forgotten technology." "Good," Ethan said, eyes closing in relief. "And," she hesitated, "Earth's council wants to meet us." "Great," Ethan groaned. "Politicians." Zara laughed softly. "They're calling you the human who stood against the dark." Ethan winced. "That's embarrassing." She grinned. "You earned it." Epilogue. Months later, Ethan and Zara stood together on a platform overlooking Earth's orbit. The heart of Elender was housed beneath Earth's surface now, safeguarded by joint human-elendary forces. "You could go back to the elendary throne," Ethan said. Zara shook her head. "The elendary are gone. Earth is my home now." He smiled. "Then let's get to work." They turned toward the stars. Somewhere, Lord Kale was regrouping. But Earth was no longer defenseless. Humanity had stood against the dark and won. Together, they were ready for whatever came next.